In Tier 2, here are the 4 teams to watch heading into Stage 2 because these teams have the chance to be able to qualify for champs, which is unheard of because that was a thing until partnership. But now they have the chance to be able to qualify and play Tier 1 teams in VCT Americas. These 4 teams should be on your radar because as of now, they have been probably the best opportunity to be able to play against these Tier 1 teams. And right now I have a list. We have M80, we have SRB, we have ADG, and we have SAD. And I have another one that I'm thinking of, but we'll get into that a little bit later. M80 has been the Tier 2 team that looks like the most Tier 1 ready team. As I've looked into some of their games, I've seen that they have been really good with their systems and their map pool has been very great. They've been pretty much dominating the teams that haven't been to their level and have been pretty much outperforming teams in a whole series. Even if they drop a map, they have shown to be the stronger teams. And that goes to not only the coaching, because if you haven't known that Kaplan is on M80 now, and he's also brought in Caillou, who both were previously on Sentinels. And as they've implemented their experience onto this team, it shows that if they have the chance to be able to play against Tier 1, that they'll most likely be ready. Now, the one concern that I do have as I've looked into some of their games and some of the stats and some of the previous experiences of the other players, and that includes Bonnie, because everybody else has had experience at a high level, whether it be Ascension or being able to already play in Tier 1. And Bonnie hasn't had that experience. He has been the star duelist, has been popping off, has been playing pretty well. But when it comes to being able to play on big stages, or in the sense VCT Americas or anything close to Ascension, he hasn't been that person yet. Because you have Nismo, who has been the experienced vet, has been grinding Tier 2, has been formerly a coach, but now a player, and has been a really good role ever since the start of Stage 2, because in Stage 1, he was previously the coach. Stage 2, Cap comes in along with Caillou, and Nismo has just been frying ever since, has probably been one of the top players in Stage 2 and overall Tier 2, and just hasn't been the chance to be able to get into Tier 1, and everybody wants, he is probably your favorite player's favorite player. Like, he is able to show a lot of skill sets, but the thing that kind of holds him back is his age. And that's what is holding him back. Not that he's not good for his age, but some teams don't want to take a chance on him just because he's, within his 30s, and people want younger, more youthful, more energizing players if that's the case. And so Nismo has been the core of the team after previously stepping back into a role where he's known as the core initiator, along with Caillou, who has also been their initiator. They've been running a lot of double initiator and solo duelists, where Bonnie comes into play. And along with that, you also have Alvin. Alvin has previously been on TSM, who has had the experience in Ascension, pretty much almost on the brink of that, only to lose into Envy. And he's been their solid Sentinel player. They have been a really good core of a team that has a huge amount of experience, and so they can overcome a lot of the obstacles that a lot of these Tier 2 teams that I'm going to get into later have to overcome. And not only that, but they have a really good map pool. They have been dominated on their favorite maps like Lotus, being able to stomp out teams on Pearl, Fracture, and then some of the other maps as of now, at the time of recording, we're only 3 weeks into Stage 3. They haven't really shown their split, their Haven. They previously lost on Haven against SRB. But along with that, I think this team is prime and set, and it's probably the most perfect timing to be able to step out of Tier 2, win in Tier 2, and then go potentially into Tier 1 and potentially qualify for temps. Because a lot of these lower seeded Tier 1 teams, I think a lot of these Tier 2 teams are able to outplay them or outshoot them, and so it's going to be really exciting heading into Stage 2 for VCT Americas. And the other team that I want to go into is SRB. And SRB, I personally have watched the most just because I've been watching them since the Mata and Brock days, where they have always shown potential. Even Vic, believe it or not, not a lot of people know that the core of SRB was Vic, Mata, and Brock. And at a certain point, like they've all gotten their own ways, and they've shown like really good spots in tier 1. And as I've following as I've followed this team throughout its many iterations of rosters, I feel like this is a good roster where they have a star duelist. Previously they had Ion as their duelist, but now they have Smoke, who's a really good duelist, also can be able to play a really good chamber. And at least for this team, they are the most competitive against M80, as I previously said, is the most tier 1 ready team. I feel like SRB is just slightly under that. I see them making a lot of mistakes, or a lot of like unnecessary mistakes, not necessarily game plan mistakes, but a lot of like kind of immature mistakes. As they go onto teams that are a lot higher, they tend to forget that the simple fundamentals, like they'll often go on individual fights that are unnecessary rather than playing as a team. And again, as I've watched this team probably the most out, there's so many times where they're just making bonehead mistakes. Again, peaking individually, letting a team having a 4v1 clutch. Like I remember previously they played against Flyquest, and there's so many times where they would throw away a clear advantage round against a team that just can simply sometimes outshoot them in a round. But enough of the negative. I feel like this team is prime and set with their star duelist Smoke, their experienced leaders in Nature and Xander, as Nature has been previously in EG, Xander in 100 Thieves. Even Xander has IGL'd, so I'm assuming he does some of the mid round, and he's just one of the guys to rely on as a standard really good smokes player that is able to play in tier 1 as well. And along with that, you also have Satellite and FEs. FEs is previously the coach of SRB or SRG, that's Shopify Rebellion Gold. That's the GC team. And FEs has had a lot of success with the GC team as they won GC champs and have had a lot of success. And as FEs has transitioned into tier 2 Valorant, I feel like there's been some growing pains as this is a new core. Again, M80, as if we compare the two, M80 has had a more experienced core, whereas you have experienced personnel but not an experienced core. So they're kind of gelling together, and that leads into the additional man, or the last man part of the squad, and that is Exa. Exa has come over from Korea Challengers and has some really bright spots. I feel like there's been really good games where he's had impact, but there's a lot of other games where he kind of shines or like goes under the lights, like can often have an average performance when he has really high highs. And I think he's a player to watch because he's a really good Viper player and a really good Sentinel. I think he maybe can just be a victim to the game plan, or he can just, when the game comes to him, he really thrives into it. I feel like a lot of Sentinels, they tend to be less individualistic, or Exa can shine and have some really good clutches and have some really good impact rounds. And so for him, I feel like it's just being able to balance the two. And if I were to pick an underrated player to watch, then I would pick Exa. And as we go on from SRB, again, these two teams, and one thing I forgot to mention was SRB is also another team that has a primary duelist and will sometimes switch into double duelist, but for the most part, it seems like they're pivoting onto sort of like a double initiator along with M80. Previously, again, they played double duelist, but so they have that adaptability with Smoke and Satellite. But as of now, we'll see how they develop and evolve into potentially playoffs. And that leaves a new team, and that's ADG. A lot of tier 2 teams, you would see that sometimes experience doesn't necessarily matter. If a team is really good aimers and has really good chemistry, which is probably the most valuable thing you can have experienced pros, but I feel like chemistry is probably the most important thing, because even if they're making a lot of mistakes, they're able to cover for people's mistakes. And over time, you're able to patch and like learn from the experience and be able to grow overall as a team. And ADG shines with their new roster because they've added Ion, Vic, and they also have Floor as a sub, which I imagine Floor will most likely be a sub if they're able to make it into champs, because Ion is currently 17. He's probably one of the biggest highlight add-ons, especially as he's recently left MV, was previously on SRB, and then now is on ADG. And so I feel like ADG has been a really solid contender, especially even though with a less experience of a core, I feel like they have really star-studded play, especially with Vic as well. Vic has been always been a really good smokes player, and it's going to be a really strange situation because this is a really good team, but if it comes to the point where they excel and go above expectations and maybe even make it into playoffs, because I know Ion is able to play playoffs, but if they make it into champs, then that's where they would need somebody that's 18. And if Vic was previously taking a break from Cloud9, then that leaves a dilemma of would Vic play because he previously wanted a break. And so ADG again is a really highlighted team. They have some really good pros on there that can make a lot, maybe potential upset against some of the top dogs in tier 2. So yeah, and now it leaves the last team, and that's Sad. Sad has been really good in this stage because I feel like one of the games that really impressed me the most was that they're down 10-2 against NRG Academy, and they're bringing it all the way back. And in that instance, I thought Energy Academy, which has probably been one of the better teams and is probably one of the top 2 teams, but unfortunately they're academy team, and so they won't be able to play or like in play-ins for stage 2 for VCT Americas, because you can't have academy teams that are under an org. Same thing with EG Academy. If they're able to flip it around, they can only if they make it to grand finals, then they wouldn't the second place team that's not an academy team would be able to make it into play-ins. And in that instance, I thought Energy was clearly the better team going into the split, which was again a 10-2, but they were able to draw it back and have a really huge momentum swing when a lot of unexperienced teams would crumble. And part of that comeback was their main duelist Vita. And Vita has definitely been one of the best performing players in stage 3 of VCL or North America, because not only is he the primary duelist playing Jett, probably everybody's favorite comfort primary duelist is Jett, and he's just been able to be set up really well. Along with that, they play double duelist with Paint, and Paint is another former player off of SRB who had really high highs as a Neon player, but in this instance he's playing Phoenix, which has been like the support, kind of like a Leviathan, where they're often playing a Phoenix in most of their maps and setting up plays for the team or plays for the primary duelist, and in this case it's Vita. And when it comes down to if this team is solid, is if in their game against M80, because they're going to play in this upcoming week, and if they're able to beat M80, then they are a solid force. One thing I noticed is that they have really excellent form. All the other players are being able to have spotlights and have really good performances in teams against like Flyquest. Flyquest was probably one of the biggest teams to be mentioned as the top VCL North American teams. Fortunately, they've been underperforming, but one of the Flyquest things was being able to have really chaotic, really like flashy plays. When they played, when Sad played Flyquest, I think they're able to pretty much neutralize all of that. I feel like that shows really great signs. If they're able to handle chaos and really aggressive teams, then that can send up really good fundamentals for those dark horse teams, and then now they're able to play like some really solid core teams like M80 and test how really good they are. And lastly, a team that's, again, I think it's a team that I just mentioned, and that's Flyquest. Flyquest has some really good moments. They've played in stage 1 and stage 2, and they've recently added net, but I feel like it's recently been a drawback to how they've been playing. One thing I really wanted to discuss and I've been thinking about is like, for these teams like Flyquest that are really aggro and they'll get in your face, they'll play arena, they'll play like, in a sense, like sort of gimmick comps with like a clove. They're really aggressive and they have like really good individual and form and mechanics, but as they continue on throughout a stage, you obviously want to develop really these young players, because if you have them develop really bad habits, then they won't last a really long time in tier 1. And so there's the dilemma of like, do you have a really good play style that can dominate a lot of people, and do you solely focus on winning, or do you solely focus on developing this team, because obviously format is going to change and we're really looking forward towards the future, and not really making it a priority. Or, well, obviously they want to win, but like, you're willing to sacrifice the now and develop these players in a fundamental way, like play, pretty much traditional comps and be able to, recognize like game plans and be able to sort of play at a tier 1 level, so that not only do you help the players, but you also help the team overall. So again, like Paper X, they were kind of like a scrappy team, like not anywhere near polished in the beginning. And so they developed, and even though they would dominate in certain regions or certain aspects of, maybe a stage, they were always being able to sometimes be exploited at the top level. And so they had to sacrifice, being willing to learn some of the fundamentals in order to be in the top form where they're at now. And so with all these teams, I think it's pretty interesting how it'll develop, because these are most likely the favorites to be able to make it in. And even with Flyquest, I feel like even though they've had a recent bad stint, they're still one of the teams, if they're able to make it into playoffs, then they have the potential to be able to upset some teams, including the teams in these lists. And what's even more exciting is the teams that I mentioned, the 4 teams that I mentioned, that's M80, SRB, ADG, and SAD. They all play each other. M80 plays SAD, ADG plays SRB. And so within this upcoming matches, we'll be able to see how they test against these teams and who performs and who underperforms. And last thing I want to add is that, unfortunately, a lot of these games are played at the same time. There'll be 2 games playing at the same time. So there'll be a mainstream team and then a B stream team, or there'll be a mainstream game, like let's say SAD and M80, and there'll be a B stream team. And so that will be like a energy QOR. Unfortunately, I'm not able to watch all these games, and unfortunately I do work full time, so I'm able to watch a majority of it. But again, these are only my visualization, or sorry, these are the only things that I've observed. Yeah, subscribe.